we're going to give you the ingredients to cook up your own meal. And those
Right.
ingredients are the facts from that level of reporting. And we're giving that power to the everyday American, and it's never been accessible.
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't, and we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hersh Rephun, and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes.
My guest today on Truth Tastes Funny is Kira Shishkin. Kira is the CEO of Informed, the news concierge service to beat information overload. And I have tried it. I can tell you that that is exactly what it delivers. Kira is a four-time serial entrepreneur. He's a strategic advisor, an investor in technology, and his experience spans a lot of other areas too: investment banking, corporate strategy, private equity investments, in category defining ventures. His education includes University of Chicago, Booth School of Business, and Stanford. He was in the Forbes 30 under 30, and I'm glad to have him here today because, as I just mentioned him before we hit record, the news never stops, does it, Kira?
No. Hirsch, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation, and thank you for that generous introduction.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. One thing I haven't asked you, I don't, I think, and we've spoken a couple times, but I haven't asked you, uh, with all the different things that you've done, all the ventures, all the business stuff, what drove you to create a platform like Informed?
Totally. Well, I appreciate the question. I think every single part of the journey on kind of my entrepreneurial journey, my life journey generally has been, you know, not so linear. There's been a lot of very unique pooling forces led me to starting one thing versus another. So I don't know if there's like a single thread that kind of stitches it all together. I'm not maybe sure. And it's funny because I love this quote saying, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And I think I'm not just quite ready to connect them all of them yet. But in case of informed.now, which is really a venture that wasn't planned, wasn't something that was like a trajectory leading up to it. It was very much a pull by an observation of what's going on in the world. And with informed.now, what we're doing is essentially trying to restore the information integrity, the information infrastructure in America, which has been really suffering over the last decade, and you could even say 2 decades. And it's been really hard for people to stay informed without getting drained along the way. And we're
Yeah.
reimagining that, right? As you can get informed without, it costing you your nervous system.
Well, one thing that occurs to me is there's plenty of us who are conscious news junkies, right? And we say, well, we don't know who to trust. We don't know we don't know what's real and what's not, and so forth. But we're actually already trying to find the truth. And, there are plenty of people out there who are disinformed, don't really know, and I believe that, that disinformation of all kinds, wherever it appears, wherever it rears its head, disinformation, intentional misleading of the audience is responsible for us being in this position. It's not as in the United States, let's take as an example, it's not because there are so many people in the United States who are evil and they want to do evil. And then there are so many people in the United States that want to do good and they want to do good. And it's a battle between good and evil amongst the masses. It really doesn't seem like that at all to me. But it does seem like the reality that is painted for each sector or faction is just very different from the reality of the other.
Absolutely. I mean, I love that you really like painted that picture because we are made to believe by legacy news media that we're in some sort of a struggle, sort of a battle, some sort of a fight all the time, because the feelings of anger and fear are viral and they spread very, very quickly, and people react to them so strongly that the paper sells. But
Yeah.
that narrative that we're in some sort of battle against, some sort of partisan fight is a fantasy. And we have so much more in common than we have, apart. And it's a shame that this kind of human anger and fear instinct has been weaponized by media against us, right? Over, enough decades now for that to be the precedent and the status quo. But it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to consume news that divide us. We don't need to consume news that trigger uncomfortable, deep emotional responses. We can consume information that is pure and that is helpful for us to make informed decisions, for us to, be informed around the world around us without being influenced, without being drained, without being overwhelmed, without being manipulated along the way. That's the
Yeah.
spirit, the philosophy behind informed.now is pioneering that solution in a very, very deceptively simple format of a single text message.
Yeah, and this is what I wanted to get into next is tell the audience a little bit. I've experienced it, so I know, but inform.now, how the algorithms, the aggregation of the information works, and how it's delivered in that text.
Absolutely. I mean, in summary, right, we are the leading news by text service in the US. And what does that really mean? There isn't a lot of solutions like it. We essentially text you news, but we don't text you clickbait. We don't text you headlines that have no substance behind them. We actually do what has been described by our users as the opposite of clickbait, where we send you a very brief kind of news briefing, it's a summary text that actually does the opposite work of clickbaiting you. It tries to actually make the topic digestible, accessible, and clear so that you don't have to then go and do cross referencing and checking and reading this side, reading the other side. It's exhausting. And a lot of people don't have
Yeah,
time for this research. And so, what we do is we kind of do the research work for you by distilling the facts that we collect primarily from primary sources, right? We don't look at other journalists as much. We look at primary sources, right? The central bank, the White House, the company statements, the UN resolution, the Supreme Court case, the Bill of Congress, and we distill the essentials. Essentially, what happened, when, where, and what is the immediate context you need to know about it. But then we stop short of commenting, of
yeah.
providing interpretation, because that's up to the reader, we believe, to make up your own mind. We give you the tools to make up your own mind, but we stop short of inducing a perspective.
Yeah. Well, you know what you just described, Kira, is news reporting, which I think that a lot of people, even growing up today, have never seen a news report. A new and what I found very refreshing was I opened the text in the morning and nothing riled me up. Nothing got me, even though there was stuff in there that you could say, "Oh my God, I can't believe that," right? But there was nothing about it. It was just, I don't remember a headline, but it was like White House announces blank. Let's say as an example, White House says this. And, I have my own opinion about what that means, but it didn't inflame me just from the title. Whereas even sources that I like will have headlines that inflame. And I really get upset sometimes because, you know, I for example, okay, Midas Touch. I love Midas Touch. I love listening to them. I think what they're doing is really important. At the same time, the headlines are very sensational. And I feel like they're they're wanting us to feel what they're feeling and not just learn what they're sharing. And in a way, even though, like Ben Meiselas will say, I bring the receipts, and he may be right. He may be bringing the receipts, right? But he's so passionate about it, it's obvious that he's not a news reporter or a news agency. So now I can't rely on Midas Touch for news. I can only rely on it for commentary. And that's what happened with other news agencies. And then there's the ones, in the middle that still kind of are not necessarily like Midas Touch will say, okay, we're fighting for democracy. They're a voice for democracy. That's the thing. So they're on one side, you know, Fox, CNN. How do you, for the audience and for me too, can you delineate like what corporate owned media, legacy media, mainstream media, when you hear those terms, what does that conjure for you and who does that refer to?
Sure. I think it goes even a little bit deeper, and it's not a well known, I think that's the spirit of what you're asking. It's not a well known hierarchy of the industry,
Yeah.
but when we look at this sort of retail level of news, like Fox, CNN, the whole NBC Universal conglomerate,
Yeah.
we look at Washington Post, New York Times, Huffington Post, we look at these sort of very popular, like everyone knows, everyone has heard these names before. These are household media, like retail news media names. When you walk into a bar, right, there is a TV playing sports, but next to it, or in the middle of it, or intermittently, there's an anchor that comes on, and this anchor tells you something. You recognize the anchor. You kind of understand their persona, and they're telling you about something, right? That is the sort of like what I would refer to as the retail level news. By the
Yeah.
time the information itself, right, the facts themselves get to the retail level, they have been regurgitated, spit out, ingested, digested, reinterpreted so many times that it's almost impossible to get actual facts at that level. You only kind of wind up with the commentary. So then you ask, where do the facts originate from? And it lives in this, a not very well known level of the news industry called the news wire. It could also be called the news agency, which is a specific type of
Right.
company that focuses on reporting but not necessarily distributing it to the everyday person. And it's
Right.
essentially news at a wholesale level, right? And there's actually a very small number of companies around the world who are leading this industry. It's AFP, it's Associated Press, it's Bloomberg, it's Reuters. They have their own reporting muscle where they would send out people, to the ground floor of Wall Street, right, to Afghanistan, to Syria, to Israel, to Ukraine to actually collect evidence. And then they sell that evidence on a wholesale kind of level to the news companies. And CNN and Fox News are buying from the same dealer, so to speak, and then putting their own spin on it. And so
But even, yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
I would just
But
say that
but
the power of the
yeah, yeah.
news, the power of facts that exists at the level of the news wire is the power that through informed.now we are essentially, democratizing and bringing to the everyday American so that you don't have to be stuck with the junk food of retail news. We're going to give you the ingredients to cook up your own meal. And those
Right.
ingredients are the facts from that level of reporting. And we're giving that power to the everyday American, and it's never been accessible, right? This layer is sort of like the shadow wholesale industry that has not been even talked about. Most people have no idea it exists. And that's where the truth or the ground facts, right? That's where they live.
Yeah. So now when we think about the AP or Reuters, still, you know, we we find that, are also, is there also some kind of balancing act that we have to do in looking at those sources? Like you pull from among those so that we don't have to, we're still not limited to one source. We don't have to trust one source. How does it work once you get rid of the retail layer and you're on the wholesale layer? You're still kind of, you still have to use some discernment in your own mind to figure out whether there's a skew, right?
Sure,
Or you
sure.
tell me.
And I would say that the news that Reuters publishes and Associated Press publish is not necessarily the same product that they sell at a wholesale level, right? So that's their own retail arm that we see as kind of retail
Okay.
consumers. But the news that gets moved around the back room, backstage, looks a little bit different, and it doesn't have the long form verbose commentary. It's very much like the facts of what happened, where did it happen. It's much more bare bones. So I will just mention that. The second element, what you mentioned, is I would almost describe our process as a bit of it's a hierarchy of priority. The ultimate kind of superpower of informed.now is not just the aggregation of reporting level insight, it's actually like primary sources themselves. So for a lot of issues that we track, that we focus on, from unemployment, inflation, Supreme Court cases, bills of Congress, United Nations resolutions, groundbreaking research around the world, we don't take that from a reporter or from a journalist. We take that directly from the primary source. And so that is even better than the wholesale level because we're taking it directly from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
Sometimes that doesn't exist, right? Sometimes it's a military reporting. There is no primary source, or the primary sources are conflicting and non-credible for whatever reason. In that case, we do this exercise of aggregating reporter insight at the wholesale level. We rarely, I don't really think ever, get to the retail level of having to get our news from another retailer. Because by the time it gets that level, it's already very, very stained. And so we rarely get there. I would say two-thirds of our coverage actually comes from primary sources. And we give you the
Yeah.
power of those primary sources through citing our sources. We do that for every single story that we share. When it's reporting level, we always prioritize, citing the primary reporters that were, first of the story, have the best coverage, and then maybe like edge case, right? Maybe less than 5% of cases, do we have to get to the retail level, which we still aggregate across a lot of sources to get to the common fact base, to figure out sort of what are we all agreeing upon that is beyond bias, that is almost, pre-bias. And those essential facts sometimes we would very rarely get from the retail level. But the trick or the superpower is primary source loyalty. And two, when we don't have that, is aggregation of insight on a larger base of reporters so that we know that we aren't just reading one side, we're reading all of them. And when we see everything, we can tell what is commonly agreed upon, what is factual, and how do we sort of stay away from any sort of color, any sort of editorial filter. And you've seen our
Yeah.
work, so I think you've seen us succeed in that in the past. I'm curious about your reaction.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I find that it was a culture shock in a way to me to have such a uh, kind of honest reporting of news. And what struck me most was how we have our own biases, right? So, I mean, I still remember seeing news when it was reported without color. I mean, there was color. They would call people in to give color. And then, somebody might have more leaning toward one side or another of a point of view. But in this case, what interested me was uh, how you select the news that the individual wants to is actually interested in, not the slant or the perspective, but the actual topics that are of interest. And then I'm also curious that, you know personally, when you're pursuing truth and you're pursuing um, the straight story, let's call it, um, how do you manage your own emotions about and your own opinions about things when you're actually in something of control?
Yeah. Oh, great questions. I think the first one I'd love to tackle, I think it's really important because a lot of folks ask us, how do you decide what makes it into the text? And here there's a lot of philosophical sort of surface area because on one hand, we don't want to be We don't really strive to be a specialty publication that focuses on, for example, healthcare or technology.
Hmm.
Much better places to get that sort of thematic specifics that you're interested in. So if you're a real estate enthusiast and you want to learn about that industry, right? There are so many better places than us, and we don't really want to play in that specialty game. On the other hand, we also are not in the business of hyper personalization because it's a bit of a philosophical conviction around we don't want to create echo chambers, right? We want to stitch together exactly what you want to hear because social media already does that pretty well. We don't need to,
Yeah.
we don't need to, resonate. We don't need to kind of amplify that. So what
Yeah.
we do, and we kind of think this as our value, is imagine if you did not want to read news at all, but you like really wanted to know what's going on, right? And you said, okay, I'm only going to spend 1 minute a day to get informed. What would you read in that 1 minute? Well, the most world changing news, the most world changing phenomenon, the things that will actually impact your decision making, the things that will actually impact your sense and understanding of the world. Those are the things that should make that 1 minute sort of cut off. And the way
Yeah.
we filter that is based on significance. And so we don't talk about sports. We don't talk about celebrity drama. We don't talk about gossip. We don't talk about, things that people read about and are interested in, but it borders more on entertainment rather than like information
Yeah.
news level. And the questions that we answer when we try to evaluate the significance of an event is how much does this affect how many people, right? We're looking for millions being affected in either their safety, security, their freedom, their optionality, right, being changed, right? If 1 million people are going to be less free or more free, if 100,000 people are gonna lose their life or their security or their children, which is happening around the world, right? We
Yeah.
want to talk about those things, right? If there's an economic shift that's going to change the relationship between the two largest economic unions of the world, say the European Union and the United States, we're going to talk about that because that's going to change the world in meaningful ways, in a lot of
Right.
trickle down effects. And so that's the level of significance that we filter for and we bring to you in our briefing. And we like sometimes to, we kind of pride ourselves on it is so not personalized in a way because we have this strict filter that we think some of it should surprise you sometimes. Like you should not be able to read news and know exactly what's coming because
I
that's
did.
echo
Yeah.
chamber. That's an echo chamber. You should
Yeah. I
be
did find that. Yeah. No, go ahead.
sometimes seeing something that's significant but not what you ordered, like not what's expected, because that's the role of news is to inform you, and you can't inform yourself if you're controlling the entire process. If you're cherry picking the entire echo chamber, you can't really get informed. You're going to have a lot of blind spots, right? And so that's part of the mission as well in the level of curation that we offer.
Yeah. And I did find that. I did find that it was surprising because I still am getting other news from other sources. So as much as I try to, look at it first thing and kind of get your perspective or the informed.now perspective first, um, when I knew of other things that were going on, I was surprised by the headlines, but also kind of relieved. Um, so before we wrap this up, I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit about the model, a little bit about the informed.now model. Obviously, they can go to informed.now, but but share with the audience a little bit of how to find you, how this works, how they can
Yeah.
try it out, and so forth.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. For folks who are interested in what we're pioneering, which is news mindfulness, right? It's media minimalism of a kind. We are the easiest to join. Our website is our company name, and it's just informed.now. And that's our website address. When you go there, you have a chance to learn more about what we're doing, how we're doing it, our mission, and it's a one click of a button to sign up and see for yourself. It's completely free to start and see it. And if you enjoy it, we ask for a contribution, because we only take revenue from our users so that we can be independent of any sort of ulterior influences. We reject advertisers. We reject any sort of tech platforms, any sort of investors that want to, or sponsors that want to, put a perspective into it. We only take our revenue from the users. So our subscription is $9 a month, or $100 a year, or $99 a year, and we, are really on a journey to make news accessible, make pure news, make the power of facts accessible to the everyday American.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Kira, for coming on the show and for sharing this. I am interested to see, how this disruptive kind of uh, platform grows, because the more people who are getting, unbiased news, and again, our minds do what they do, but we can cut out all the retail garbage, really, that just is there to gaslight us, really just there to get us worked up. So, thanks for doing what you're doing, and I'm really glad that you came on the show.
Thank you for being a supporter, for sharing this mission, and for welcoming me on your show. It means a lot to me. Thank you, Hersh.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.